続いてのプログラムはパネルディスカッションでございます。第2部のテーマは、米新政権と今後の日米経済関係です。ステージの準備が整いますまで、今しばらくお待ちください。
It's my great pleasure to welcome the four speakers on this next panel, which I think will continue some of the discussion regarding that Ambassador Wolff started. The recent election, as we all know, was a tremendous surprise for many of us, myself included. And there are many uncertainties regarding what U.S. economic policy is going to look like. And in particular, and of particular concern is what the future of U.S. International economic policy is going to look like. Fortunately, we have four amazing panelists who I'm sure are going to kind of further some of this discussion about international economic policy. I don't want to spend a lot of time introducing them, but let me just give just a few words about each of our panelists, and we'll go in the following order. First, we'll have Professor Akihiko Tanaka, who is president of the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, better known in English as GRIPS, speak. Before his current position, Professor Tanaka was the professor of international politics at the University of Tokyo and served as president of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, from 2012 to 2015. He's written many books and articles published in World Politics and Security Issues, both in Japanese and in English, including perhaps very aptly named, but a little bit scary now, the New Middle Ages. Perhaps we are entering the medieval period, at least in America. The world system in the 21st century. He is an expert on international politics and received the Medal with Purple Ribbon in 2012 for his academic achievements. Our next speaker is none other than Columbia's own Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs, Merit Janow. She is also professor of practice in international economic law and international affairs at Columbia University, a good friend and longtime colleague at Columbia, deeply knowledgeable about international trade policy, deeply knowledgeable about Japan, extensive experience in academia, government, international organizations, business. Is there anything you haven't done? And she's also co-director of the APEC Study Center and the chair of the Faculty Oversight Committee on Columbia's Global Center in East Asia. The third speaker, sitting to Merit's left, is also someone who needs very little introduction, either in the United States or in Japan. Gerald Curtis. Jerry Curtis is the Burgess Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Columbia University. He is a TV talent, a tremendous academic. He has written, obviously, extensively on Japan. His Logic of Japanese Politics is a classic in the field, as well as Japanese Way of Politics, Election Campaigning Japanese Style. And as Hugh likes to say he has known every single prime minister of Japan, save one who only was there for a few weeks, and is well sought out for his advice in Japan and in the United States. And finally, we have Ambassador Wolff. I won't repeat Hugh's very eloquent introduction of him. Let's begin by first welcoming remarks by Professor Tanaka, and then we'll move through the panel, and then I'll open it up for questions, and feel free to ask questions either about this panel or Ambassador Wolff's earlier remarks. Professor Tanaka.
ワインスタイン先生、どうもありがとうございました。本日は、コロンビアのパネルに参加することができて大変光栄であります。このパネルディスカッションは米新政権と今後の日米経済関係ということがテーマですが、ウルフ大使の先ほどのご講演にもありましたし、他のパネリストの専門も経済関係ですので、私はこの経済関係を取り囲む一つの環境として安全保障問題について少し申し上げたいというふうに思います。トランプ政権が発足するということになって日米関係を考えている者にとって経済関係についても大変不安を覚えましたけれども、安全保障関係についても大変不安を覚えました。キャンペーンの最中にトランプ候補は日米の同盟関係を全面的に見直すかもしれないと、そういうことを示唆するような発言をなさっていたからであります。ただ、実際は1月に政権が発足して以降、日米間の安全保障関係自体は適切に運営されてきたと思います。一つには安倍総理がトランプ政権発足以前にトランプ候補と会見し、それからまた2月に日米首脳会談を行って、そこで日米安全保障関係についてはこれまでにない明確な言葉でアメリカが東アジアの安全保障にコミットメントをする。日米安全保障条約は尖閣諸島にも明確に適用されるということを明示的に示したということがございます。で、この背景にはトランプ大統領が任命した国際政治安全保障関係の閣僚がほぼすべて伝統的なアメリカの戦略を支持する方々であったからであります。国防長官に任命されたジム・マティスさん、それから国務長官レックス・ティラーソンさん、それからフリンさんが辞任された後に国家安全保障会議担当のアドバイザーになられたマクマスターさん、皆アメリカのその東アジアにおける戦略については継続性を支持するという方々ばかりであったからであります。で、その結果、この2、3ヶ月のアメリカの東アジアに関する安全保障政策の一つの大きなテーマとして浮かび上がってきたのが北朝鮮の問題であります。そしてこの北朝鮮の問題は私は今後の日米関係、それからアメリカの東アジアとの関係を考える上で大変重要だと思います。国務長官のティラーソンさんが東アジアを訪問されたときに、これまでのそのオバマ政権が取ってきたいわゆるストラテジック・ペイシェンスという政策は間違いであったと、これからこれを変えるというふうにおっしゃったことは大変重要だと思います。 すべての関係者がよく分かっているように、北朝鮮問題というのは大変難しいわけで、1990年代から20年にわたってこの問題についてアメリカを含め各国がさまざまな対応を取ってきたわけですけれども、対話をするにせよ圧力をかけるにせよ、いずれにしても北朝鮮は核開発を進め、弾道ミサイル開発を進めた。最近になってオバマ政権は北朝鮮が何をやっても明確に良い方向に行かない限りは全て無視するというやり方をやってきた。でただこの無視するというやり方をやってきても結局北朝鮮は数々の核実験を行い、しかも高性能の弾道ミサイル実験を繰り返すということになってきた。でやはりこの際非常に大きな政策を追求していかなきゃいけない段階にそろそろ来てるわけですね。やはり北朝鮮がアメリカまで届く ICBM のミサイルを技術を完成させ、しかもこの ICBM に核弾頭を載せるというところまで核弾頭を小型化させるということができると、これは同盟国それからアメリカを含む戦略情勢が質的に異なる段階に向かう可能性があるからであります。つまり今までは北朝鮮がどんな挑発的な行動をやったとしてもアメリカはアメリカ本土を攻撃される恐れなしに圧倒的な通常兵力でもって北朝鮮を壊滅させることができるわけです。ところがもし北朝鮮がアメリカ本土を核攻撃できる能力を持ったとすると、北朝鮮が挑発的な行動を行ったときにアメリカにとって果たして北朝鮮を全面的に攻撃して壊滅させることがアメリカにとって良いことなのかどうかという疑問が生まれる可能性が出てきたわけであります。でもちろん北朝鮮が直ちにそういう挑発的な行動をするとは分かりませんけれども、理屈で考えると、もし北朝鮮が ICBM を持って核弾頭をこれにくっつけられるということになると、戦略環境が著しく変わる。これが起きる前になんとか北朝鮮に止めさせるというのは、私は必要な政策だと思っております。ですからそのために日米、それからアメリカが中国と今の段階で協力しているのは、私は大変正しい選択だというふうに思います。ただ、ここから果たしてこのような安全保障環境が今後のアメリカの東アジアとの経済関係にどういう影響を与えるかということになると、先ほど来お話になっているように不確定性はかなりあると言わざるを得ないと思います。一方では安全保障環境が緊迫すればするほど経済面で摩擦を起こすのはやめようというインセンティブが働くとすれば、これは経済関係についてはそれほどおかしなことは起きないということになるかもしれません。ただ他方、中国に対する北朝鮮問題での協力を求めるということによってアメリカの中国への経済問題でのその要求が著しく弱まったりですね、あるいは逆に日本についてだけ経済問題についての要求が強まるというようなことになると不健全なことが起きるということになろうかと思います。ただいずれにしても安全保障面のからの面で言えば今ほど北朝鮮問題に対してアメリカ、中国、日本、そして新しい大統領が生まれた韓国の間の協力が必要な時期はないということは言えるというふうに思います。とりあえず私なんか。
Great. Thanks very much. Merit, do you want to?
Thank you. Well, first let me say what a pleasure it is to be back in Japan, to see so many friends here today, and to have the privilege of participating with my colleagues and very expert friends here in this discussion. I think Ambassador Wolff has summarized, very, very powerfully well, what's occurring in Washington and in the United States on trade. And I suppose the fundamental question that I ask myself these days is, are we going to see, or have we seen, a fundamental break with history as a result of the policies being pursued by the Trump administration, or is this just a function of this particular president? And we might revert back to something that we're more familiar with. And I think that is an important question. And of course, I don't know the answer, but I would just observe that, we had trade feature very prominently in this election, and there was no candidate that was very multilateralist or pro-trade. Every single one, was saying negative things about trade. Bernie Sanders, Secretary Clinton, and of course, the then candidate Trump. I think that we should not just ascribe some of this sentiment to this president. We need to analyze and always differentiate the underlying trends and then the particular policies that you might associate with this president. And I think what we're seeing in the United States at this time is really very complicated. And the traditional liberal, Democratic, and Republican split is just doesn't explain what's happening as we think about this moment. So we should try to keep in mind what's particular to this administration and what are these underlying trends. It's talked a lot about is the rise of populism, but I think it's more the tensions having to do with globalization, automation, changes in the workforce, perception of stagnant wages and inequalities. It's a bundle of things that, and it's a moment of great contrast in the United States. Incredible technological advancement in areas like precision medicine and data and computational sciences and the biomedical and the FinTech. The digital economy is really with us, and it's creating enormous change and opportunity. We're seeing it across our research centers at Columbia University in very exciting ways. But it's also creating tremendous anxieties and altering the political discourse in the United States. And I think the policy response to this, has not been, to my mind, reassuring that we're going to manage the future in a path that will strike the right balance between, seizing the opportunities. I would say, for example, that trade policy is not going to save the U.S. industrial base, just as trade policy that was more open markets, I think, did not destroy the industrial base in the United States. It contributed, open markets, to factors that were working together. So when it comes to trade policy, what can we expect? Again, I think I very much agree with Ambassador Wolff. Some of the extreme statements during the campaign have not come to pass in policy, such as the imposition of across-the-board tariffs or the tearing up of NAFTA or the pulling out of the WTO. And some of the bigger ideas that have been put forward appear not to be going forward, such as the border tax adjustment. I think the White House is not endorsing that at this point. So I'm not expecting that. But pulling out of TPP has happened. So Japan faces a choice, and I think a very interesting sense now that Japan may try and move ahead with the 11. And what would that agreement look like? I think if Japan had been left on its own, it might not have negotiated as firm rules as the TPP, maybe something more like the RCEP structure, but now it's pursuing them. We've seen a whole cluster of new executive orders that I think give you an insight into this administration, and the initiation of new trade cases. Some of these are using established tools in new ways, and of the ones that cause me particular concern, I would point maybe to three. One is this Buy America, Hire America philosophy, because actually I think it's not going to produce dramatically different changes in U.S. policy, but I think it will produce bad behavior around the world from my point of view, because I think there's always that tendency around the world, whether it's by France or by Canada or by China or et cetera. The use of government procurement as a tool of industrial policy has been something the U.S. has pushed back against. Around the world is the champion of the government procurement code. And so, but now it sounds like the U.S. is moving down this path. We'll see. The currency provisions I also worry about. They could be manageable, as Ambassador Wolff said, but on the other hand, how? Who's going to be interpreting, currency manipulation? I don't think trade officials are the best equipped to make those interpretive judgments, and I don't think international institutions have shown themselves very able to evaluate currency manipulation effectively either. The stated emphasis on bilateral deficits is a real issue to my mind, but I think it's also a way of saying that bilateral deficits are a signal of other underlying practices that need to be a source of concern, such as overcapacity and dumping potentially from in sectors like steel and aluminum. So I think it should be triggering countries to think about whether there are overcapacity issues that need to be addressed and thought about. So those are the things that worry me, as do any adjustments, were they to occur in U.S. CFIUS application. The Trump administration has emphasized the value of foreign direct investment, of infrastructure investment. So I think that the U.S. will be open to foreign investment. But there is a debate that's starting about whether the U.S. should change its standards of review in some way, and that we'll have to watch closely. The NAFTA is an old agreement, 1994. And let me just say the key question, which Ambassador Wolff alluded to, is whether this administration will be able to identify and move towards a positive agenda, a constructive agenda on trade. I would expect that it will be looking for ideas on what that could be. And I think, NAFTA is an old agreement, and it can be modernized and needs to be. So the question is, what will that look like? What could that look like? At the moment, not surprisingly, I think both Mexico and Canada are focusing on a lot of U.S. practices that have been troublesome to them for a long time, like sugar, maritime shipping, all of the things that the U.S. has been a foot dragger for a long time. But there are other opportunities that are much more of a positive agenda. I do think the digital economy is a positive agenda. One of the areas where the U.S. and Japan could work more closely. Opposition to data localization is one feature of the digital economy where we have a shared viewpoint. I actually think the discussion that we just had on FinTech is in fact a very important subject for us to talk about bilaterally. When Minister Aso was in the United States recently and spoke at Columbia and was asked, what are the areas you think the U.S. and Japan should work on? He said cyber and energy. And I would say on cyber that, in fact, that FinTech conversation we just had is a cyber conversation. Because it's, it's saying, where are the system vulnerabilities when it comes, and, what can we do and learn from each other to collaborate around those, whether it's things like payment systems or liquidity risk. That is a subject where regulators need to talk to each other more, where information sharing among financial institutions needs to occur more. There are many things that I think we could do that would be constructive on that agenda. I don't know if focusing on the U.S.-Japan bilateral free trade agreement would be the best use of our negotiating capital in the current environment.
Thanks very much. Jerry?
Well, first, let me say how delighted I am to be here and to see a lot of friends in the audience. And I want to focus my comments on some aspects of the political situation in the United States that made it possible for Donald Trump to be elected president, and that are driving his trade and foreign policy agenda and what all that means for the U.S.-Japan relationship. So many working-class Americans voted for Trump because they're dissatisfied, they're frustrated, and they're angry, and some of that anger derives from the belief that globalization is a cause of stagnant and declining living standards and unemployment among the working class, and is a major source of growing inequality and unfairness in American society. Hillary Clinton says that she believes she lost the election because of FBI Director Comey, the Russians, and American prejudice against electing a woman as president. The reality is that she lost because she was a poor candidate and because the Democratic Party elite has lost touch with the working and middle class that formed its traditional base. It didn't start with Hillary Clinton. In the 8 years that Obama was president, the Democratic Party went from 29 governors at the beginning to 16 now. It lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures, going from control of 59% of those legislative bodies at the beginning of Obama's term to 31% now, the lowest percentage of control the Democrats have had in 100 years. And there is not yet in sight the next generation of Democratic Party leaders. And the worst part of this story is that the Democratic Party does not realize or does not want to admit that it is in crisis. Trump's popularity has been declining, and so has support for the Democratic Party. And as for the Republicans, they have majorities in both houses of the Congress, but are so divided internally that it's questionable how much of President Trump's agenda will ever get translated into law. That's the source of a sense of relief among a lot of people who don't want to see his policies get translated into law. But this is the reality of American politics. Two parties, one of which is in a serious crisis, being the Democrats, and the other which is so divided internally that they can't agree on things like how to replace Obamacare and other issues. The level of inequality, I hardly need to emphasize, is higher in the U.S. than in any other advanced economy. While many in the top 1% enjoy incredible wealth, and those in the top 20% overall have seen modest increases in their standard of living, the remaining 80% of Americans have seen their incomes stagnate for decades. Well, the problem is not globalization. The problem, it seems to me, is a political one. It's the political problem of the failure of the U.S. to adopt policies to deal with globalization's negative consequences, to ease the adjustment for people whose lives have been upended by economic change. The U.S. has had trade adjustment assistance policies on the books since the Kennedy administration, but spends less on retraining workers than almost any other advanced country. This is all helps explain why Donald Trump is our president and not Hillary Clinton. TPP. As Merritt just mentioned, all the candidates, that wanted to be nominated for president, they all opposed the TPP. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and all the other Republicans. Many Japanese that I talked to believe that the U.S. will come back to the TPP, maybe even under Trump. I don't think there's a chance of that happening anytime soon. But in any case, the most important point is this. We should not underestimate how much American attitudes about our country's role in the world is changing. In my view, we're at the end of a long post-war era during which America for a long time saw it in its national interest to be magnanimous in sustaining the liberal international order. The international system now is becoming increasingly multipolar and unstable, and the power of the U.S. and the goals of U.S. foreign policy are becoming more limited. This trend was evident before Trump became president. It will continue after he is gone. So Trump will not be able to bring about a complete break with the past as far as American foreign policy or economic policy, trade policy is concerned, even if he were to try, which he is not about to do. But I think that there is a very important shift in American attitudes that are in the direction of supporting the trade and other policies advocated by Donald Trump that will continue after he is no longer president, perhaps pushed the next time from a populist on the left rather than one on the right. Let's not forget that the trade policies offered by Bernie Sanders were very much like Trump's, and they contributed to his popularity. So I think it's wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking to believe that Trump is an aberration and that when he is gone, the U.S. will embrace once again the role and the burdens of being the leader of the international economic and political order in the way it has in the past. We're into a new phase of world history. Now, as to U.S.-Japan, Prime Minister Abe's meetings with Trump in Washington, and then the 2 days they spent together in Mar-a-Lago, was a great success for Japan, a great personal success for Abe, who I think read Trump exactly right and knew how to handle him, and handled him extremely well. But it also, I think what that meeting underscored is that for Japan, there is nothing more important for securing its national interests than to foster a strong relationship with the U.S. president, whoever he or she might be. The geopolitical realities in East Asia, some of which Professor Tanaka referred to, the geopolitical realities in East Asia leave Japan with no option but to strengthen its alliance with the United States. Abe and Trump appear to have forged a truly warm and close relationship, a Donald Shinzo relationship that, as I said, I think is real. Abe was successful in convincing Trump to back away from just about everything he said about Japan during the campaign. But the relationship is bound to face difficult issues going forward, some of which are unpredictable because Trump himself is so inconsistent and so unpredictable. The Aso-Pence economic dialogue. This was a Japanese idea, an Abe idea that Trump at first was reluctant to support. But Abe convinced him that the two countries should have overall discussions on strengthening economic cooperation, and that Japan's deputy prime minister and the US vice president were the appropriate people to lead it. A major consequence of this dialogue has been to push off into the future discussion of specific and contentious trade issues. In Japanese, it was an exercise in sakiokuri. And that was a major Japanese objective in proposing this dialogue in the first place. And it's been successful so far. It makes sense for Japan to take a wait-and-see approach while the Trump administration tries to figure out what its policies and its strategies will be. And as you've heard today, no one quite knows, including the people in the Trump administration. Japan will delay as long as possible negotiations about a bilateral FTA. And as I understand it, it has made it clear to the Trump team that on agricultural liberalization, it's ready to negotiate an agreement along the lines of the concessions it made on agriculture in the TPP. But if the US pushes for more than that, Japan will resist and drag the negotiations out, during which time Australia will capture more and more of the import market for beef. I expect US pressure on Japan on trade issues will be there, but I don't think they're going to cause major disruption in the bilateral relationship, nor are there going to be likely to be serious differences over bilateral political and security relations. Let me conclude. The challenge that faces the US and Japan is not so much how to manage the bilateral relationship, which is quite strong, good. The challenge is how to coordinate policies to deal with the dangerous geopolitical realities in the issues in East Asia, and how to respond to the changes taking place in the global economy. We can take small comfort in knowing that the bilateral relationship is basically okay if the world around us is in turmoil. So the most important question facing the US-Japan relationship is how the two countries can work together to foster peace, stability, and prosperity here in East Asia and globally. Thank you.
There's a lot in what the panelists have said to think about, and a lot that actually 99% that I agree with. With respect to Professor Tanaka's opening remarks on security, Ashton Carter, the Obama Secretary of Defense, said that TPP is worth to him another aircraft carrier. What did he mean by that? He was talking, I think, in terms of soft power that Janow popularized and Hillary Clinton believed in, that we had to be present in Asia through TPP, and that I don't think that RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, is a substitute in any way, shape, or manner. I don't think that the Gaima show believes that either, or Meti. Lighthizer has said that we're not abandoning Asia, we're going to be heavily engaged in Asia. Presumably that will have to be through some bilaterals, but that has to be sorted out. With respect to an analysis of this last election, the second point I'd make is that polling shows, this is Gallup polls and Pew Research polls, that youth in the United States are by 72% in favor of free trade. That's sort of interesting. And Bruce Stokes, who presents this data for Pew Research, says the solution to get back to free trade is very simple. We older people just have to die. You know, that is, it's the fact Bernie Sanders had as a candidate, anti-TPP candidate, had a lot of support among the youth. I don't think they supported him over free trade or not free trade, or they don't want actually to work in factories making steel or in textile mills that don't exist anymore. They are going to get the jobs of the future. The AI jobs in the 20s, when they're in their 20s. Trade policy is going to become more muscular with respect to overcapacity issues, and that largely involves China on aluminum and steel and perhaps semiconductors, the President has mentioned. One area for cooperation is, which Japan apparently is contemplating, because it's formed a general counsel's office at METI, is cooperation with respect to WTO issues, say, with respect to things like subsidies. Janow points out quite correctly that there has been a shift in the feeling within the United States, insecurity over globalization, and I don't think AI seems to be going to, David Weinstein asked that question this morning of Mr. Asher, you know, where do the jobs come from? When 3 million truck drivers lose their jobs as trucks become automated, you know, that's going to actually cause some disruption in the United States. So, you know, this next industrial revolution may be rather painful and have political consequences. Do we have a break with history? That's a fascinating and wonderful question, to which I don't have an answer. I think there's a lot, you know, when I said reality creeps back in, Senator from Iowa, Mr. Grassley, says, well, wait a minute. You hate all those factories that ran away to Mexico. He doesn't put it in those terms, but basically he says, but, oh, much of our corn goes to Mexico. So, you know, there's someone who says, well, we've got to keep an open market with Mexico. Merritt is correct that I think investment reviews are going to get tighter, whether they're changed by law or just changed by administrative practice. In terms of things we can work together, again, Merritt pointed to a number of things like FinTech, cybersecurity, cancer research, infrastructure. I came here from Nagoya on the Shinkansen. We don't have that in the U.S. We have one supposed high-speed rail in Excella in the eastern U.S. corridor, which isn't high-tech at all, not high speed. So, you know, can Japan work with us on infrastructure? It would be a blessing. There's much that we can collaborate on. Gerald Curtis, among other very good points, talked about the absence of domestic policies with respect to adjustment in the United States. This is a very, very serious shortcoming, and there's been nothing that I've seen with respect to the new administration that addresses this in any way. In fact, they're headed in the opposite direction. The Congressional Budget Office says that the House Republican bill would leave 23 million people who now have insurance without health insurance. So actually, we're headed in the wrong direction on our domestic policies. The areas for cooperation with Japan, whether there's a free trade agreement or whether it's areas of cooperation through the economic dialogue, I think the opportunities are really better here, as I alluded to in my remarks, than with any other country. The NAFTA is going to be about preserving and enhancing the regional integration of North America, which is just fine, and updating and modernization. But in terms of building the world trading system, there is no better partner than Japan. The UK is really completely unavailable and was headed in the wrong direction with respect to its domestic politics. And there are major problems dealing with the sort of hydra-headed entity called the European Union, which the Europe project, I think, is extremely important, and the U.S. has to still support it. But negotiating with Europe is exceptionally difficult. There was a U.S. negotiator that Merritt will know at USTR on agriculture, who said, when sitting across from the Europeans after a very frustrating day, he said, you know, over the course of the last 2 centuries, the innovative people of Europe moved to the United States, and now we're left dealing with you. So we will have selective agreements with Europe. We'll be able to cooperate with Europe. Europe is not in a position, even after the German elections are done, I think, to embrace a transatlantic deal of a major sort of free trade agreement across the Atlantic. Their populism is a significant force, just as is ours. We could probably do it. I don't think the Europeans can. So I see the opportunities for Japan and the United States to work together as really the most promising, if only we, on either side, are able to craft that. And I will say, seeing Toyo Gyoten here, that Japan's civil service, the professionals in the Gaimosho and the Korosho, and I never can remember the name of Meti anymore. I'm used to Tsusansho. They're really top flight. They're really very, very good. And they managed, as Gerald Curtis said, the Abe Trump meeting with phenomenal success and finesse. And maybe they'll help us, give us technical assistance in the United States on moving forward together. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I want to start by having a little bit of a discussion that's going to follow actually one of the earlier questions that we had of Ambassador Wolff earlier. Many years ago, I actually worked on in Washington on the Structural Impediments Initiative. And I remember at that time what I was told my role was in the interagency process and trying to come up with things to ask Japan to do. My main role was that U.S. policy should be prevented from doing harm. And I was told that the role was to some extent to be like a gardener that's mainly pulling weeds and doing a little bit of planting. And as I am listening to what is being proposed, I'm obviously concerned, and particularly concerned that the Council of Economic Advisors has now been moved out of the cabinet. So there's really no one, in fact, I think besides Peter Navarro, who is an apostate economist, certainly no academic economist advising this administration that I know of. But I want to begin by raising a question about this issue of bilateral trade deficit. So as Ambassador Wolff mentioned, if you did a poll of PhD economists, you probably would find that 99% of them would argue that that's a bad way to set trade policy. And this echoes a question that was raised earlier. So we have a number of people who are either, who are political scientists and or have been involved in trade negotiations. And I want to kind of turn the question around, and let's just say that the U.S. does start to go down this path of trying to put pressure on countries like Japan that run bilateral deficits and starts to ask for things that are that make little or no economic sense. And we'll just define it to be that if about 95% of economists say it doesn't make economic sense, let's just give the economists the benefit of the doubt on that one. What should Japan do? How should Japan respond if you start seeing the U.S. asking for policies like voluntary export restraints or voluntary restraint agreements or price undertakings, these policies that raise prices, that essentially organize international cartels and raise prices in the U.S. markets. What is the right way for Japan to deal with U.S. pressure in these directions? And let me just start with Tanaka-san, and we'll move through.
私は今のワインスタイン先生の質問に対しては日本は二国間の貿易赤字のみを問題にするような交渉については反対であるというふうに言い続けることだろうと思います。1980年代もそういう交渉をやってきたと思います。最終的に政治的な交渉でどういうふうになるか、これはよく分かりません。で、ここのところに関して言うと、先ほど川内先生がおっしゃった見解に少し触れざるを得ないというふうに思います。というのは、川内先生の見方からすると、私は多分希望的観測にとらわれているのかもしれませんが、トランプさんを勝利に導いたアメリカのその人々のそのものの見方はどれほど第一にそのバイラテラルトレードデフィシットと分かちがたく結びついているのか、経済学者のほとんど意味のない話だということだとすると、この交渉をやってもそのアメリカのそのトランプさんを勝利に導いた人たちのウェルフェアが上がるということはないわけですから、ほとんど実益がないことになります。それから第二に、先ほどウルフさんおっしゃったことですけれども、本当にそのトランプさんを勝利に導いた人たちのものの見方が今後もアメリカを支配し続けるのかという問題であります。でこの辺は JE から私は希望的観測に浸っていると言われるのかもしれませんけれども、確かにアメリカにおいて不平等という問題は大きいですけれども、今 G7 の国の中で最も経済成長率の高いのはアメリカですよね。それから、平均値だから問題ですけど、1人当たりの GDP も G7 の国の中で一番高いのはアメリカです。それから若年人口が増えているのもアメリカです。それからアメリカの軍事予算は追いつかれつつあるといっても、今でも中国の3倍はあります。ですから、そしてまたアメリカにおけるエネルギー生産を考えると、アメリカはますます中東に頼らなくて済むようになっているわけですね。ですから私はこのような指標から考えると、アメリカが世界的な指導的地位を追求したくないというふうに思うと言っても、世界の他の国見渡してアメリカほど世界的な指導力を発揮できる客観的条件のある国は他にはやはりないんだと思うんですね。でそれを 果たして本当にトランプさんを支持に導いたアメリカ人たちは、ずっとやはりアメリカのこの有利な地位というのを使わないという形にするのか。私はアメリカにとってみれば、やはり最終的には TPP に戻るとか、WTO のルールを守るとかという普遍的な経済ルールを守ることの方が、今のアメリカの一番有利なポジションを守るのにつながるんじゃないかと思っており、したがって、日本はマルティラテラルな原則を貫き、アメリカが変わってくれるのを待つということだと思います。
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll be a good panelist and attempt to answer your question, even though I don't fully agree. I think, you know, while I don't like the point of focus on bilateral deficits because I think it's misguided and unworkable, and the reduction may or may not do anything to correct the global U.S. deficit, I think it would be a mistake to say that if the U.S. raises this, that means there is no problem. That is to say that, you know, a market is fully open and contestable. So I think the response of Japan or any other country, and Japan has heard this argument before, would be to focus on what are the conditions occurring, you know, in the economy, and is it reasonable to take measures to open the market still further, and what would those look like? So even if one disagrees with that point of focus, as I do, that I would hope that it would be possible to still get some serious engagement on the underlying conditions in the markets that are being challenged.
So first, I think the danger of the Trump administration focusing on Japan, on the bilateral deficit with Japan and making demands on Japan of voluntary export restrictions or anything else is very minimal. There's going to be a focus, if there's a focus on bilateral deficits, it's going to be with China, which accounts for 50% of them. And that's where the public attention will be placed as well. I think, so that's the first point. The second point is that, as I suggested in my opening remarks, the Japanese response to the Trump on economic and trade issues has been to try to wait and see, not make any commitments, try to keep the discussion at a high level of generality, which is what the ASO-Pence discussion is, and wait for time to change the administration's position. That's a very sensible policy to take, and Japan, as well as the rest of us, will see where we are 6 months from now or a year from now. The third point, which is part of the Japanese response, which also makes a great deal of sense and which has gotten a lot of positive response from Trump and the people immediately around him, has been for Japanese companies to increase their investments in the United States, in job-creating manufacturing, Toyota and other automobile companies increasing their investments, in Toyota's case, in Indiana, in Kentucky, and elsewhere, and Abe suggesting that there was a lot that Japan could do to contribute to Trump's goal for having major investment in infrastructure, including bringing the Japanese Shinkansen to different parts of the U.S. and hopefully to the East Coast, so we could get from New York to Washington and back in a reasonable span of time. The bilateral deficit issue is not an issue that's, I think, of public concern. The public concern is over unfairness, over inequality, over the obscene differences in the distribution of well-being in the American among the American public. So it's not surprising that voters didn't take this issue very seriously, but it's a way for Trump to symbolize his emphasis on this populist emphasis on trying to reduce inequality. In short, I don't think that, at least right now, we face this issue with Japan in that serious manner. And finally, at the point that Tanaka made earlier, with China, where I thought there would be much more of an emphasis on the bilateral deficit, Trump has basically said, look, if you help us with North Korea, we'll go easy with you on the trade issue. This is a ridiculous position to take. First of all, because China will not go so far on the North Korean issue as to threaten the existence of the North Korean regime. And if they don't do that, they will continue to help keep this regime alive. And as long as they do, at some point, Trump will realize that he's not getting very much out of the Chinese on North Korea, and China will develop an ICBM capability, and we will be able to do nothing about it but to figure out how to live with it, in my view. So there, Aki and I have somewhat a different point of view.
Hard to disagree with the foregoing, and I do agree with it. Japan has portrayed itself as a friend with respect to investment in the United States, which I think was very favorably received. And it's exactly the kind of thing this administration wants. The second step is, will it be an ally with respect to other issues with other countries? As Professor Curtis has pointed out, the number one problem going into this administration came in with, before the sort of the North Korea aspect of dealing with China, was that China was very bad as an actor, that it had raped the United States in terms of its economy. There's a strong sentiment of that aspect that's been tamped down for the moment by the president's initiative with respect to North Korea. So I think there'll be, as I said in my remarks, there'll be selective measures. Now, is Japan an ally or not with respect to those measures? Is it an ally with respect to dealing with overcapacity in steel? Certainly the economic interests are allied. And if it's seen as an ally, then there's likely to be less collateral damage of then turning to Japan and saying, but wait a minute, you're not going to fill the void now that we've taken care of China. If we do, the United States says, you're not going to fill the void, are you? Which tends in the direction of managed trade. That second question is still an open question of a big issue will be, is China a non-market economy? Since under the WTO rules, there was a special way of dealing with China trade under trade remedies for 15 years, and there's an open question with some ambiguity in the language of the WTO provisions as to whether it would still be dealt with as a non-market economy. Will Japan stand up with the United States and say, as Europe has, it is still a non-market economy in most sectors? The question going forward in the bilateral relationship, besides helping the Northeast Corridor get from one place to another through a Shinkansen, is it a trade policy ally?
So I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience, if there are questions. There were questions. There were excess questions for Ambassador Wolff earlier. So people should feel free to, if you want to ask a question based on his speech, feel free to ask. Robbie?
First, one little data point, and then a couple. Robert Feldman from Morgan Stanley. One little data point and then some questions on trade policy. A data point, the U.S.-Japan trade deficit in 2016 was $68 billion. U.S. GDP in 2016 was $18,560 billion. Okay? So the trade deficit is about 0.366% of U.S. GDP. This is a very small number. It's a rounding error. Okay? So I think this goes back to the point I think Merritt was making about that it's a symbol of something. So is there a possibility that in these negotiations there would be a way to shift the emphasis on bilaterals to bilaterals that matter with the definition that it has to be, say, more than 1% of GDP? That would include the Chinese. It would include nobody else. So could USTR move in that direction? So we're still bilaterals, but bilaterals that are meaningful. So that's the first question. Second question. There are a number of names that are prominent in U.S. trade policy now. Ross, Lighthizer, Navarro, the Pansasso talks, Jerry Cohn. If you want to talk to the U.S. about trade, who do you call? Look, this is going to be confusing, and until we have clarity on that, it's a little hard to see the future. And then finally, on the bilateral negotiations themselves, how large a staff would USTR need to have any kind of serious approach to having a number of bilateral negotiations going on?
Yeah. I think one comment is that government is theater, and this government is more theater than most. But every government, to some degree, is a matter of theater. So the fact that, not that the voters voted on the basis of who had what deficit, but as Gerald Curtis said, on the basis of fairness, $68 billion is going to seem like a large number to a number of people in the Midwest, as well as the rest of the country. So I don't think that, I think that the question is, what's the good news announcement? Maybe it's purchase of LNG or shale oil. Who is in charge? I don't think there's any daylight really between Wilbur Ross and Lighthizer, and that they will in fact be largely in charge. I think I place my money there with respect to who's in charge for a couple of reasons. One is the Congress expects Lighthizer to be in charge of trade policy. That's what the statute says. That's what the organization of the Congress is designed to do. So there's jurisdictional committee questions within the Congress that USTR is the lead negotiator, but I see Wilbur Ross as being chairman of the board. And I don't think there's a conflict between them. There may be some conflicts with some others in the administration. The president seems to like that, and that probably will continue. The gating problem with respect to a number of free trade agreements is less, because you can have a cookie cutter approach and you say, well, we'll just make a few little changes, but we'll basically take TPP and we'll do 11 of those, and we won't do a lot of renegotiation. You could do that, but the gating mechanism is the Congress. We've had 16 free trade agreements in 32 years. That's one every other year. The Congress is not designed to handle sort of an automatic mechanism that they're going to approve every trade agreement that comes up. And that will be a real problem of just capacity of the system. So we did several, we had three trade agreements, I guess Peru, Korea, and Colombia together, but it took years to get them through because someone will object to something with respect to any particular agreement. And one thing I didn't get into is the idea that it's easier to negotiate bilaterally, which I think is partially a Trump kind of idea, and Navarro sold it to Trump. Trump likes it because he's used to bilateral negotiations. It's easier in a real estate deal to deal with one party rather than a dozen. is a complete misunderstanding of trade negotiations. Namely, if we're going to just have I was told today that why isn't there a free trade agreement between Japan and New Zealand, both free trade countries? Well, New Zealand says, well, yes, the only thing we really want is dairy. And Japan says, yes, that's the most difficult thing possibly you could ask us. So there is no free trade agreement between the two. Bilateral agreements are very, very, very hard to come by.
If I may add one comment, slightly not all serious, but let me just observe that every Commerce Secretary since Mac Baldrige has tried to absorb USTR and then into commerce, and then Congress rears its head and they end up remaining separate agencies. Secretary Ross is clearly very well aligned with the president, as I'm sure Ambassador Lighthizer will be, but I would predict the similar impulse to arise in this administration as the previous one, so it wouldn't surprise me at all to see that occur. But one of the things we should also be observing about this moment is fundamental pushback against the so-called deep state, argument that you're seeing every agency in government facing very big cuts. And I think Secretary Tillerson even said the other day that even if he obtained certain funds, he wouldn't use them because he wanted to reduce personnel in state. So I don't think that's an inhibitor to multiple trade negotiations if USTR wish to go forward. But it's a very curious moment in the U.S. government around these issues where I think there'll be a longer period of uncertainty of getting that second and third tier in and functioning than maybe we've seen before. In past administrations, it tends to take until about June for agencies to be fully staffed. So it's not so unusual to have that not complete in May, but this administration may see a different dynamic.
We'll do Sergey and then Antonio.
Sergey Braginsky, University of Maryland. There is a basic macroeconomic relationship, of course, that trade, when you have a big budget deficit, that kind of implies big trade deficit. And so I think there's a big elephant in the room here that is what's going to happen under this administration to the budget deficit of the United States. And there is as much confusion in this regard as with regard to everything else. On the one hand, as you just mentioned, there is this kind of push towards cutting federal expenses. On the other hand, there is a talk of a big cut in taxes and big increase of expenditure in infrastructure, which is all going to add a lot to the budget deficit. So I don't think we can really talk about what's going to happen to trade deficit without having some clarity on this issue. And to Mr. Tanaka's point, I agree that the U.S. economy is doing really, really, really great in recent years. Well, as long as Trump doesn't, keeps himself to his tweets and doesn't mess up with real things, it should be okay. But what's going to happen? I think I don't know what the panelists think about the actual impact that his policies may have on budget deficit, and from there everything else.
I think that's a David question.
Well, I mean, I think as was said earlier, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So we've kind of gone down this path before. So in the Reagan years, we had government that cut taxes in a big way. and did big expenditures, and we got big government deficits. And how do you finance a deficit when the government needs to borrow a lot of money? It has to borrow that money from abroad, and that creates a massive trade deficit at the national level. So if you're running a big national trade deficit, you got to be running some bilateral deficits, and so then you go down the path of picking your bilateral, the countries that you're running the bilateral deficits with, and you go after them. And we saw a series of protectionist impulses in cars, steel. We saw anti-dumping actions. We saw a variety of things develop during that time period. And to some extent, Japan actually played its cards very well by organizing these restraint agreements, because effectively what they did was they raised prices. It was a government-sanctioned cartel of the U.S. market, and eventually that led to investment in the U.S. market and things like this. So we've kind of seen it before, so I think there's a reason to believe that there'll probably be some sort of tax cut under Trump. There'll probably be some sort of infrastructure or military or some sort of expansion in government expenditures. And so we'll see that happen again. And maybe this time around, it may not be Japan that'll be the target, but somebody's going to be the target. The second thing that's an issue here, I think, is that failure may be an option in terms of U.S. policy. That we've seen a number of times where Trump has kind of tried to institute policies, whether it's reform of healthcare or other things, and suddenly discovers that these policies, as he said, whoever thought that healthcare policy reform would be this complicated. And we may see the same thing with trade policy. So it's one thing to sit around and say, oh, NAFTA, let's just tear up that agreement. The reality of NAFTA is that US-bound tariff rates are around, at the MFN levels, are around 5%. Mexican-bound tariff rates are around 30%. On let's say about 80% of their goods. So the capacity of the U.S. to raise tariffs if we don't have NAFTA is fairly limited. The capacity of Mexico is much higher. Now, I don't think we're going to go down into a path where NAFTA gets torn up and everyone goes to their bound tariff rates. I don't think that's likely. But it does raise this issue that, it's not obvious that NAFTA was such a problem for the United States. We got enormous Mexican concessions and tariffs as a result of that agreement. But the possibility that we repeat what happened under the Reagan years, I think, is a very real one. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I do agree with, it's easier for Congress to cut taxes than it is to balance the budget. So chances are we head in that direction of a greater budget deficit. With respect to outbreak of protectionism, the targets now are really excess capacity that's been built up under industrial policy in China with respect to aluminum and with respect to steel. And it wasn't macroeconomics that got us there with that problem. And I think it's a common problem that Japan, at least with respect to steel, sees things quite the same way. I don't know if they, if they'll like the policy that is implemented, but in terms of the analysis of the problem, I think that most countries that are the beneficiaries of dumped steel from China feel the same way about it. So I may be short-sighted, but I see, I don't think, I do agree, NAFTA comes out all right. we're headed in the right direction now. The plants that ran away, if that's what happened, then actually ran further and are located in China. So the pressures with respect to dealing with Mexico, the rhetoric is there, but the reality is not so much. And as far as, for example, our automobile sector, it's integrated in North America, and it will be a major force. There are a lot of businesses that will be a major force for keeping NAFTA as is. The National Foreign Trade Council Board, the organization I chair, strongly believes in, thank you very much, NAFTA as is, and if you're going to do anything, just modernize it, but that's all you should be doing. And you have all of the agricultural interests who feel not all of them, but most of them, who feel the same way exactly. So I think we're headed towards, in many areas, a traditional trade policy, and I don't see I may be short-sighted, I don't see an outbreak of protectionism, the kind that we saw when the dollar was overvalued at the time of the Plaza Accord, that sort of thing. We'd have to see the macroeconomics move in a direction that caused really severe pressures and even much larger deficits than trade deficits than we have today to see that kind of political reaction.
We still have time? Yes, for you, always.
Well, thank you for fascinating debates. In spite of all those gaffes and scandalous remarks, I am deeply convinced that President Trump is still strongly holding up the concept of American democracy, freedom, human rights, etc. But at the same time, we have to recognize that the very strong feature of American democracy is the fact that it is very intricately intertwined with strong element of idealism and certain elements of hypocrisy. Now, has President Trump and also some 50% of American voters have decided to discard this element of idealism together with hypocrisy. I'm seriously wondering what has happened in the United States last November, I mean. Is it just a passing aberration, or has American democracy changed? Because after all, Japan is a brainchild of American democracy. Article 9 of our Constitution is very symbolic in that sense. So I'm concerned. Thank you.
So it sounds like our political scientists should weigh in on this.
Tanaka-san, why don't you go first?
後で反論否定されることになるかもしれないけど、私はアメリカのその仰天さんおっしゃった、アイデアリズムと、ちょっとばかりのヒポクリシーっていうのはそれが、少なくとも、1945年以降のアメリカのリアリズムに非常に一致していたのでこのアイデアリズムとその少しばかりのヒポクリシーというのが継続してきたんだと思います。こんなヒポクリティックなことを偽善的なことをやっててもしょうがないというふうに見たのが、11月の選挙だったのかと。我々はもっと現実を見つめなければいけないと。現実をちゃんと見ればそんなアイデアリスティックなことを言ってる余裕はないんだというふうにアメリカ人が思った。そういうふうに思った人たちも多かったのかもしれないと思います。で、確かにトランプ大統領の就任演説を聞いてみると そこで言っているのは、アメリカはよその国を富ませるためだけ富ませて、自分はその犠牲になってきたとか、それからよその国を守ることだけやって自分のボーダーは守れなくなったという、つまりアメリカ自身が、周辺諸国から、搾取されてきたという、そういうイメージが就任演説に表れているわけですね。でもしこのイメージが現実にその通りであれば、アメリカが、偽善的に振る舞っていることは愚かなことだというのはそうなると思います。ですが、私先ほど申し上げたように、アメリカがよその国から搾取されてきたなどということはどこにあるのか。で G7、先ほど言ったように一番経済いいわけですね。で若い人もどんどん来るし、それで直近で見ても失業率は過去最低に近いわけですね。ですからそうすると、この仮にそのアメリカが搾取されているというイメージでがある時期あったとしても、やっぱりアメリカの現実というのは、アメリカにとってアイデアリスティックなことを言ってちょっとばかり偽善に振る舞う方がアメリカにとって得になるというふうに私はなるんじゃないかなと思っています。
I'm not quite sure how to get my arms around this issue. I think the point that in the post-war world, there was a coincidence. The American idealism and American realism were one and the same. We were the strongest country in the world in every respect, economically, politically, security terms, soft power, and so on. And what we have seen in recent years and what we saw in the election last November is the sense that we cannot afford some of the policies that we have pursued in the post-war era because we're no longer in a position to be so magnanimous. I think the idealism, fundamental, the idea of America as a democracy and freedom and all the rest, I think that's all still very, very, very strong. But the sense that I think this issue of inequality and unfairness and the idea that America has done very well economically, but the rewards of that economic success has gone to a very small group of people who do well. The median income for Americans from 2000 to 2014, median incomes went up about 20% in Canada and in Britain, 0.3% in the United States. The idea that we are not living up to our ideals of being a country that gives everyone an equal chance, that's very strong. That's what the reaction is about. So if we don't deal with those issues, we will lose this sense of idealism. And the reason that in my comments that I stress so much the failure of the Democratic Party, the idea that Hillary Clinton just didn't win because of the votes in a few states. This doesn't make any sense. How could the American public elect someone like Donald Trump to be president? Why? Okay, so it didn't have to be like Macron winning 65% of the vote against Le Pen. But why did not the Democratic candidate do much better than it did? And the answer is that there is an anger, there is a frustration, there's a fear among a large number of American people that the parties are not responding to. So the strength of American democracy, by the way, is not only is that we do have a system of checks and balances, and I think a lot of what you've heard us talking about today is that the worst is not going to happen because the system will not permit Donald Trump to do a lot of the things that he says he has wanted to do. So I'm not lost hope in American democracy, but I do think that it's a mistake to underestimate how fundamental the changes in the way Americans view themselves and view the world and view our role in it. I think we're in a new era. It's a multipolar, unstable world system in which the U.S. does not have and will not have the kind of power it's had in the past. And that's a big issue for Japan, too. How do you then, what is your role in this region and in this world and in relations with the U.S.? So that's not really an answer to your question, Toyo, but I think we're in a state where our idealism is very much being challenged by the reality of where our country is at.
I'm just going to give the last, if that's okay. I'm just going to give the last word.
Yes, quickly. I'm not ready to buy into the notion that we're headed towards permanent dystopia. It could be that Mr. Trump is the perfect precursor to a reaction back to idealism, that the idealism articulated in a different inaugural address, John Fitzgerald Kennedy's, Ronald Reagan, Obama talking about hope, Bill Clinton. I think idealism wins out. And I would not say it's twinned with hypocrisy, because I think what we have now is a fair amount of hypocrisy. Namely, we have rhetoric that feeds the base that elected this president, but actually the policies are exactly contrary to the economic interests of the people who voted for him. So I think there'll be a reaction. Now, who comes up and does that? We didn't know Obama would be out there at all. We didn't know that Bill Clinton would be out there at all in terms of who the president would be. It wasn't entirely clear that Ronald Reagan would be president. So, you know, 3 years from now, let's say, there is reasonable hope that someone emerges with an entirely different message that America can be great again in a quite different way, and that there are rational policies that support the income inequality problems and the problems of artificial intelligence that we have been blessed with in the prior panel.